Karen stood in front of my house, gasoline dripping from her hands, her eyes burning with hatred. She screamed, "Your disabled daughter is a burden to this neighborhood," then struck the match. Flames raced up the ramp I had built for Lily, trapping her inside. Her terrified screams tore through the quiet night as fire consumed our home. Karen smiled, as if justice had been served. She thought she had finally taught us a lesson. But what she didn't know, I'm a Navy SEAL, and the father she picked to mess with wouldn't stay silent. Before the story unfolds, comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable stories. Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, strutted down my driveway like a general inspecting her troops. Clipboard clutched tightly in one hand, the other swinging wildly as if she were conducting some invisible orchestra of chaos. Her eyes, sharp and wild, scanned every inch of my property with the kind of judgment reserved for medieval courts, as though she had been born with the divine right to dictate how everyone else lived. It wasn't the first time she had come knocking. For weeks, she had been meticulously documenting my violations, everything from the ramp I had built for my daughter Lily, to the backyard modifications meant to make our small garden wheelchair-friendly, to the exact color of our mailbox. The audacity of it all. She had personally appointed herself the neighborhood arbiter of taste, rules, and morality, and somehow, in her mind, my family had committed crimes worthy of public shaming. "You think your little ramp is allowed?" she shrieked, stomping her manicured foot into the concrete driveway. Her voice carried across the street, drawing the attention of every neighbor who had learned to fear her tirades. "Your disabled daughter is a burden to this neighborhood." I stayed calm but boiling inside. Every word she spat was designed to wound, to humiliate, to assert her superiority over anyone who didn't bend to her impossible standards. My grip tightened around the handle of the garden rake leaning against the porch, though I didn't lift it. She needed to understand, one way or another, that I wasn't just some passive homeowner she could intimidate. For those who didn't know me, I might have looked like an ordinary dad, tired from work, hair slightly graying, hands calloused from long days spent ensuring my home and family were safe. But they didn't know that beneath the surface, I was trained for situations far more dangerous than any petty HOA squabble. Navy SEAL, years of training, missions that tested body, mind, and spirit to the absolute limit. I had stared down threats that would make a grown man shiver, and I had lived to see the sunrise because I never let fear dictate my actions. And tonight, this was the battlefield, and Karen had just made the first move. The neighbors watched from behind their curtains and hedges. Some whispered to each other, shaking their heads. Others held their breath, uncertain if the confrontation would escalate. But I had seen this before, the theatrics, the rage, the desperate need for control. It was Karen's signature, and she thrived on the reactions of those around her. She wanted to provoke. She wanted to humiliate. She wanted to feel powerful while making others feel small. Her eyes flicked toward Lily, who sat quietly on the porch, her small hands folded in her lap. She was bundled in her favorite blanket, her wheelchair positioned so she could watch the world without struggling to keep up. My heart clenched, not with fear, but with fierce determination. Karen thought she could intimidate a child with words. She had no idea that the father, standing a few feet away, was trained to protect his family against threats far worse than a screaming neighbor. "Do you hear me?" Karen bellowed, leaning forward, her face red and twisted with fury. "You're breaking every rule in this neighborhood, and I won't stand for it anymore." She waved the clipboard like a weapon. "This is my community. I make the rules. And you think you can just live here and ignore them?" I took a step forward, my voice calm but firm. "Karen, the ramp is necessary for Lily. The garden modifications are for accessibility. Everything we've done is within the law. You don't get to dictate how we live in our home." Her lips curled into a snarl. "The law?" she spat. "This isn't about the law. This is about respect. You should respect the rules. You should respect me." For a moment, time seemed to stretch. The neighborhood held its collective breath. I could see the steam rising from her nostrils, smell the faint perfume she used to mask the acrid smoke of rage that seemed to follow her wherever she went. Every instinct screamed at me to end this quickly, to defuse the situation before it escalated. But I also knew something vital. She wouldn't stop here. Karen never did. She was relentless, unyielding, dangerous in her own passive-aggressive way, and so I stood my ground. My eyes locked on hers, unwavering. Calm, collected, prepared. Inside, a storm was brewing. A storm that would protect my daughter, my home, my family. She had made the mistake of thinking that intimidation alone could bend me. She didn't know what she had unleashed, because while Karen played the part of neighborhood tyrant, I knew something she couldn't possibly understand. I was trained to face danger. I was trained to protect. And most importantly, I was trained to never let anyone threaten my family without consequence. Karen didn't notice the neighbors shifting nervously, the tension in the air, or the quiet determination in my posture. All she saw was defiance, and that infuriated her even more. She gritted her teeth, shaking the clipboard like it was a sword. "You'll regret this. You'll see." I let her words wash over me, knowing they were empty threats from someone who thrived on fear. "We'll see, Karen," I said quietly, my voice steady, like a calm tide before a storm. "But one thing's for sure. My family isn't going anywhere. Not now, not ever." Her eyes narrowed. Her lips twisted into a furious grimace. She turned on her heel and stormed back toward her car, muttering threats under her breath. But I knew this wasn't the end. Karen never left a battle unfinished, and she certainly wouldn't rest until she believed she had won. As the dust settled, I knelt beside Lily, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, sweetie. Daddy's here. Nothing's going to happen to you. I promise." Her small hand squeezed mine, and in that moment I felt the weight of responsibility and the fire of determination coalesce. Karen had declared war. She didn't know she was up against a Navy SEAL, and she was about to find out exactly what happens when you threaten the wrong family. Night had fallen like a heavy curtain over the neighborhood, blanketing the streets in silence that felt almost sacred. Almost. Because for us, peace was a fragile illusion, one that Karen was determined to shatter. I had thought her threats earlier were the peak of her aggression, but I should have known better. Karen's type didn't settle for intimidation alone. No, she craved chaos. She craved spectacle, and tonight she was ready to escalate. It started with a shadow at the edge of the property. I had just finished checking on Lily, tucking her into bed and adjusting her favorite blanket around her shoulders. Her wheelchair was parked perfectly at the side of the ramp I had installed, providing her easy access in and out of the house. She was safe. Or so I thought. Karen emerged from the darkness like a vengeful spirit, gasoline cans clutched tightly in both hands. Her eyes burned with the same madness I had seen before, only this time they were sharper, more dangerous, like a predator who knew she had the advantage. The faint moonlight glinted off the flammable liquid, reflecting the fury in her twisted smile. "You think a ramp makes you untouchable?" she hissed under her breath, though her lips curled in such a way that I could almost hear the words scream. "You think your little girl deserves happiness? Not in my neighborhood." She moved swiftly, purposefully, pouring the fuel in deliberate lines along the wooden ramp. The smell of gasoline crept into the air, sharp and acrid, making my stomach knot with rage. Every instinct screamed at me to act immediately, but I paused for just a fraction of a second, just enough to analyze the scene, as I had been trained to do countless times before. Lily's room was just at the top of that ramp. Her sanctuary, her escape from the world's cruelty. She had no way of stopping Karen, and Karen knew that. She thrived on fear, on power, on the reaction she could elicit from those she perceived as weaker. This wasn't just harassment anymore, this was full-blown terror. I didn't hesitate. My SEAL training kicked in like lightning through my veins. Every movement was precise, calculated, and deliberate. I moved toward the ramp, assessing the angles, the fuel-soaked wood, the potential for fire to spread faster than human reflexes. My mind, trained to function under the most extreme pressure, calculated my plan in seconds. Save Lily, neutralize the threat, prevent the disaster from spreading. Then came the spark. A single match flicked carelessly by Karen, and suddenly the ramp erupted in flames. The fire raced along the soaked wood like a living creature, licking upward toward Lily's room with terrifying speed. Smoke began to curl into the night sky, dark and thick, carrying the scent of impending disaster. Lily screamed, a sharp, panicked cry that tore through the quiet suburban night. My heart leapt into my throat. I could hear the neighbors stirring, some peeking through blinds, some standing frozen in the street, unsure whether to help or flee. Fear hung heavy in the air like a tangible fog. Karen laughed. Oh, that laugh. The one I had come to dread. The laugh of someone convinced that cruelty equals triumph. "This is what happens when you defy me!" she screamed, her voice shrill, manic, and full of satisfaction. Learn your lesson. But she didn't understand what she had triggered. She had mistaken intimidation for victory. She had confused fear with submission, and she had no idea who she was up against. I sprinted, propelled by adrenaline and paternal fury. Every step was calculated, avoiding the worst of the flames while keeping my eyes locked on Lily. The ramp, now fully engulfed, threatened to collapse under the fire, and the smoke burned my lungs, but I didn't falter. Training and instinct guided me like an invisible hand. "Daddy!" Lily cried, her small voice cutting through the roar of flames. Her hands reached out, and in that moment, the world narrowed to just us. I lunged, scooping her into my arms as the fire crackled and hissed around us. Her terrified eyes met mine, wide and shining with fear and trust all at once. Karen froze for a moment, stunned that her little lesson hadn't gone as planned. My calm presence, unwavering and powerful, stopped her in her tracks. The smirk on her face faltered. She hadn't expected a direct confrontation, hadn't expected action, hadn't expected resistance. I carried Lily down the ramp, ignoring the searing heat against my skin. Flames licked at the edges, consuming everything in their path, but I moved with precision and speed, guided by years of training designed for far deadlier circumstances. We made it to the yard just as a section of the ramp splintered and collapsed into the fire. Smoke billowed around us, a choking, suffocating cloud, but Lily was safe. The neighbors, who had been watching helplessly, gasped collectively. Some ran to help, others just stood frozen, unable to comprehend what had just unfolded. Karen, however, recovered first, her face a mask of rage and disbelief. She had thought she could break us with fire. She had thought she could terrorize a father and daughter into submission. But she had underestimated one critical thing. A Navy SEAL father doesn't hesitate when his child's life is on the line. "You think this ends here?" Karen screamed, waving her arms in fury. "You'll pay for this. I will make sure—" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My gaze locked on hers, cold and unyielding. She could see the storm behind my eyes, the quiet but absolute promise that her actions would have consequences. Lily clung to me, shivering but alive. I could feel the rapid beat of her heart, the tremor in her small frame. "It's okay, sweetie," I whispered. "Daddy's got you." "I've got you. Nothing's going to happen to you. Not now. Not ever." Karen took a step back, realizing perhaps too late that her power had no hold here. The fire had destroyed a part of our home, but it had failed to break us. She turned and fled into the darkness, muttering curses and threats that I knew would come back to haunt her, and as I held Lily close, breathing in the acrid smoke, I knew this was only the beginning. Karen had started a war, and she had no idea that the man she was up against had survived things far worse than fire and fury. She had lit the match, but she had no idea the storm she had just unleashed. The fire roared like a beast awakened, devouring the ramp, licking at the edges of the house, and sending plumes of smoke spiraling into the night sky. Heat pressed against my skin, a tangible force that made each breath a struggle. My lungs burned, my eyes watered, but there was no hesitation. Every second counted, every movement mattered, and every instinct screamed at me to act. Karen had fled to the street, yelling curses over her shoulder, convinced she had already won. She hadn't considered the possibility that the father she had targeted wasn't just any man. I was a Navy SEAL, trained to handle far more dangerous scenarios than a neighbor's arson. And in that moment, my only mission was clear: save Lily, neutralize the threat, and ensure that Karen's cruelty stopped here, tonight. Inside, the house groaned under the heat. The flames spread with terrifying speed, consuming the wood and siding like paper. Smoke filled the rooms, thick and choking, curling into every corner. Visibility dropped to nearly zero, and yet my mind operated with laser precision. I moved like a shadow, assessing every doorway, every hallway, every piece of burning debris. "Daddy!" Lily's cry pierced the smoke-filled chaos. It was sharp, terrified, desperate, and it spurred me forward with a force beyond human strength. My training kicked in fully. Years of missions in hostile territory, navigating life-or-death situations, guiding my team through uncertainty and fire, all funneled into a singular focus: protect my daughter. I reached the ramp leading to Lily's room, now a corridor of fire and smoke. Flames licked the walls, heat radiating with the intensity of a furnace. My skin stung where it brushed too close to the blaze, but I didn't pause. Step by careful step, I navigated through the inferno, every motion precise, every breath calculated. The Navy SEAL mindset isn't just about endurance, it's about adaptability, strategy, and unwavering focus under pressure. The moment I saw Lily, huddled against the wall of her room, tears streaking her face, fear etched into every line of her small body, my heart surged with determination. She looked at me, eyes wide and filled with trust. And I knew that nothing could stop me now. I lunged forward, scooping her into my arms with the practiced precision of someone who had carried far heavier burdens under far worse conditions. Her small frame fit perfectly against me, and the tremble of her body spoke volumes of the terror she had endured. "It's okay, baby girl," I whispered. "Daddy's here. I've got you." The fire intensified as we moved, the ramp collapsing in parts behind us, a cascade of sparks and embers following our path. Smoke stung our eyes, burning our lungs, but I pressed forward. I ignored the heat, ignored the pain, ignored the fear, for nothing mattered but Lily's safety. Neighbors had begun to gather outside, some frozen in shock. Others racing forward with blankets and hoses, attempting to assist. Karen's voice rang out above the chaos, her screams now mixed with hysteria as she realized the situation wasn't unfolding in her favor. "This isn't over," she yelled, but her bravado faltered. The confident smirk that had haunted our neighborhood for weeks was gone, replaced by confusion and fear. For the first time, she understood she had provoked someone who would not be intimidated. We reached the edge of the yard just as a section of the ramp fully collapsed into the fire. I laid Lily down gently on the grass, wrapping my arms around her to shield her from the lingering smoke and flying embers. Her small chest heaved with panicked breaths, but she was alive, and that was all that mattered. Karen, still standing on the street, looked as though she had aged decades in mere seconds. The fire raged behind me, illuminating her furious, incredulous expression. She had expected screams, chaos, and submission. Not resilience, not courage, not a calculated rescue executed flawlessly under life-threatening conditions. I turned to her, my voice low and steady, carrying across the neighborhood like a warning. "This is your last chance, Karen. Leave. Now. Or face the consequences of what you've done." She hesitated, her eyes darting between the blaze, the gathered neighbors, and me. Panic flickered across her face as she realized she was no longer in control. This was no longer a petty HOA dispute. This was the aftermath of her own malice, and she had underestimated the cost of her actions. Finally, she turned and fled into the darkness, muttering under her breath, powerless and shaken. The neighbors whispered among themselves, stunned at the display of determination and courage. Some came forward to help me shield Lily from the remaining smoke. Others called emergency services, reporting the fire and Karen's actions. As I held Lily close, feeling her small frame trembling against me, I allowed myself a brief moment of relief. Her eyes, wide and terrified just moments ago, now began to shine with trust again. I thought she was going to get me," she whispered. "You're safe now, baby girl," I reassured her, brushing back her hair. "Nothing's going to happen to you. Not now, not ever. Daddy's here and I'll always protect you." The fire continued to burn, the sirens approaching in the distance, illuminating the night sky with red and blue lights. Karen's reign of terror over our home had been interrupted, but I knew this was only the beginning. She had started a war, one she was unprepared to fight against someone who had spent years training to survive and protect in far deadlier situations. Tonight, the neighborhood witnessed more than just a fire. They witnessed the truth. You don't intimidate a Navy SEAL, and you certainly don't threaten a father's child. Karen had made a grave mistake, and the consequences were only just beginning to unfold. The night had barely begun to cool, but the neighborhood was already charged with an uneasy electricity. Smoke from the fire still lingered in the air, curling around streetlights and hedges, leaving the scent of gasoline and charred wood in every breath. Karen had vanished into the shadows, but I knew better than to assume she was gone. This was Karen, relentless, vindictive, and utterly convinced she could bend the world to her will. Lily was safe in the house now, wrapped in a blanket and quietly shaking, but my mind was elsewhere. The fire had been only the opening act. Karen wasn't just dangerous. She was obsessed. Obsession, I knew, was far more perilous than violence alone. People like her didn't stop at intimidation. They escalated. They schemed. And they came back stronger, angrier, smarter, desperate to prove themselves. I stepped outside, surveying the street. The neighbors were murmuring among themselves, some whispering in fear, others wide-eyed in disbelief. Most of them had never witnessed the kind of fury a parent could unleash when their child's life was threatened. But I had. And now I had a mission: find Karen before she struck again. Using the training that had saved me countless times in hostile environments, I began a systematic sweep of the neighborhood. Every street, alleyway, and shadowed corner was assessed with precision. I moved like a ghost, silent, calculated, scanning for any hint of movement. The Navy SEAL mindset isn't just about physical endurance, it's about anticipation, strategy, and reading patterns. And Karen had patterns: her obsession with control, her need to dominate, her theatrical displays of rage, all predictable. She had fled toward the main road past the cul-de-sac, where streetlights flickered and the occasional dog barked in warning. I followed at a measured pace, using the shadows as cover, listening for her distinctive voice. "There's no escaping me," she screamed suddenly, her voice bouncing off the walls of neighboring houses. The neighbors' lights flicked on one by one, curtains twitching as they watched the scene unfold. Some dialed 911, reporting the fire and the woman responsible. Some whispered warnings, afraid to confront her directly. But none intervened yet. They were waiting, as I had, for the inevitable confrontation. I approached her last known position cautiously. My mind mapped escape routes, potential hazards, and intervention points. She could lash out at anyone in her path, but she would not expect a calculated response. By now, Karen's adrenaline-fueled fury would make her reckless, and that was an advantage I intended to exploit. As I neared the street corner, I spotted her silhouette under a flickering street lamp. She was pacing, waving her arms, muttering curses under her breath. The gasoline she had used earlier now burned brightly in her memory, feeding her ego, making her feel untouchable. But Karen didn't realize she was no longer in control. I moved closer, slow and deliberate. My presence had to be revealed strategically, enough to make her aware she was being followed, but not so much that she could flee again. Navy SEAL training isn't just about combat. It's about psychology. It's about anticipation, intimidation, and timing. I had waited for this moment all night. "Karen," I called out, my voice calm but carrying authority. "This ends tonight." She spun around, eyes wide, recognizing the tone she had never heard from me before. The voice of a father, of someone who would stop at nothing to protect his child, not the scared, yelling man she expected. "You think you can stop me?" she screeched. "You think a little fire, a little smoke, a little—" I didn't let her finish. Every motion was precise, every gesture deliberate. I stepped into the open, positioning myself between her and any potential escape. The neighbors watched in stunned silence as Karen realized, finally, that she had underestimated me. The very father she had tormented. The one she thought would cower, crumble, or run. Her eyes darted nervously, realizing she was trapped in a psychological cage. I didn't need weapons. My presence alone, my calculated, unwavering stance, communicated exactly what she needed to know. The war she had started was over, and she had lost. Karen's lips quivered. She took a step back, trying to regain control. You'll pay for this," she stammered, her voice no longer full of conviction but edged with panic. Her hand twitched, a faint glimmer of a possible threat. I wasn't worried. I had anticipated every move, every angle, every potential outcome. The neighbors began emerging from their homes now, some to assist, some merely to bear witness. They saw the truth. Karen had overstepped, she had terrorized, and she was powerless against the father she had provoked. Her reign of neighborhood terror had met its match. I took one final step toward her, closing the distance, and said quietly, deliberately, "Leave. Now. And never come near my family again. Or the consequences will be far worse than you can imagine." She hesitated, her gaze flickering between me, the street, and the few brave neighbors who had dared to watch. For a moment, I thought she might lash out again. But then, slowly, she turned and fled, muttering under her breath, broken and unsteady. The street was quiet again, but the tension lingered like a static charge. I watched her go, knowing she wouldn't stop plotting. Karen never did. But she had learned one undeniable truth tonight. She could not intimidate me. She could not threaten my daughter. And she could not escape the consequences of her obsession with control. Returning home, I checked on Lily again,
holding her close as she clung to me.
"Daddy, she's not going to come back, right?" she asked, voice trembling. I kissed her forehead and reassured her. "No, baby girl. She won't. I've made sure of that, and I'll always protect you no matter what." The fire may have destroyed a part of our home, but it had also illuminated something essential: a father's determination, a Navy SEAL's training, and a family's resilience could withstand even the most relentless HOA Karen. And this was only the beginning. Karen had started a war, one she was completely unprepared to fight. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon, but the tension in the neighborhood was already palpable. Word had spread quickly about the fire, Karen's arson attempt, and the rescue of my daughter. Whispers of disbelief and fear filled the streets. Everyone knew Karen had gone too far this time. And yet, despite her public humiliation, she still believed she could assert control, still thought she could intimidate us. I knew better. I had spent the night planning every possible scenario. My Navy SEAL training had ingrained one truth into me: preparation and strategy win battles before they even begin. Karen's recklessness was a weapon, one I intended to use against her. She had underestimated me, and tonight she would pay the price for that mistake. The HOA office was the natural battleground. Karen had fortified it in her mind as the seat of her power, the place where she could rally supporters, enforce rules, and assert dominance over everyone who dared oppose her. Today, I would confront her there, and I would make sure everyone witnessed the consequences of her actions. I arrived first, parking my car a few blocks away to avoid drawing unnecessary attention. The streets were eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before. Smoke no longer lingered, but the tension was heavier than any fire I had faced. I walked with measured steps, every sense alert, scanning for any sign of ambush or trickery. Karen was unpredictable, and I could not afford to be careless. As I approached the HOA office, I saw her through the front window. She was pacing, her hands gripping her clipboard tightly, muttering to herself, lips moving in a frantic rhythm of fear and fury. The moment she noticed me, her eyes widened, the mask of superiority cracking to reveal raw panic. "You again?" she hissed, voice trembling. "You can't just... This isn't over." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I allowed the silence to settle between us, letting the weight of her failures, the consequences of her recklessness, and the certainty of her defeat press down on her. In Navy SEAL terms, it was a tactical pause, psychological dominance before the strike. Karen had never been good under pressure, and now she was exposed, vulnerable, and desperate. "Karen," I said finally, my voice low, calm, and controlled, carrying the unmistakable authority of a father who had faced danger and emerged victorious. "You burned my home. You endangered my daughter. You terrorized this neighborhood. And now it ends, here, today." Her lips trembled as she clutched the clipboard to her chest. You don't get it. I'm in charge. I make the rules. You can't." I stepped forward, closing the distance, my gaze unwavering. Navy SEAL training had taught me to project calm power, to control fear, and to force the adversary into a position where their own recklessness became their weakness. Karen froze, realizing she had misjudged me, miscalculated my resolve, and underestimated the cost of her obsession with control. "You think rules mean anything when you threaten a family's life?" I said, voice firm. "This isn't a game, Karen, it's real. And you crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." Her eyes darted around, looking for allies, for excuses, for any escape, but there were none. The neighbors had begun to gather outside, drawn by curiosity, fear, and the need to witness justice unfold. They had seen her at her worst and were now watching as the consequences finally caught up to her. Karen's hands shook, and the clipboard slipped slightly. "You'll regret this," she muttered, more to herself than to me. "I know people—" I interrupted her with a quiet, deliberate step closer. "The only thing you'll regret, Karen, is thinking you could ever intimidate my family. You picked the wrong people to mess with, and now everyone here knows exactly what kind of person you are." Her face twisted with fury and disbelief. She had expected fear, submission, and panic, not calm authority, not unwavering courage, not a calculated response to her madness. The crowd outside murmured, realizing that the woman who had terrorized them for years was finally exposed for who she truly was: reckless, vindictive, and utterly powerless against someone who would fight for their family without hesitation. Karen's voice rose again, shaky and desperate. I have rights. I make the rules. You can't. I raised a hand to stop her, not in anger, but with the unyielding certainty of someone who had faced real danger. This ends now. You leave and you never come back near my family, or the consequences will be far worse than anything you can imagine. For a moment, she hesitated. Fear flickered in her eyes, replacing the false confidence she had clung to for so long. Then slowly, she turned and fled, muttering threats that sounded empty now. Powerless in the face of a father's resolve and a community that had witnessed her unraveling. I stepped back, letting the weight of the moment settle. Lily's safety had been secured, Karen's threat neutralized, and the neighborhood had seen the truth. Actions have consequences. My family was safe, and justice had been delivered in the most powerful way, through courage, strategy, and the refusal to be intimidated. As I walked away from the HOA office, the sun fully rose, casting light on a neighborhood that would remember this day for years to come. Karen's reign of terror had ended, and while she might continue to scheme from afar, she would never again underestimate the lengths a father would go to protect his child. And as I returned home to Lily, her small hand in mine, I knew one thing for certain: love, training, and unwavering determination are stronger than fear, power, or obsession. Karen had learned it the hard way. The neighborhood was quiet now, but the echoes of Karen's chaos still lingered in every corner. Smoke had cleared, the fire had been extinguished, and the sun shone brightly over the scorched remnants of the ramp. But for my family, the real work had just begun. I stood in the yard, holding Lily close, her small hands gripping mine tightly. She was tired, shaken, but alive, the single most important victory in a nightmarish ordeal. I could feel her trembling, not from fear alone, but from the intensity of knowing someone had tried to harm her. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "We made it, baby girl. We're safe now. Daddy's got you." The neighbors had begun to emerge from their homes, many still in shock, others cautiously smiling, realizing the chaos had ended. They had witnessed Karen at her worst, her rage, her obsession, her reckless cruelty, and now they were seeing the consequences. Justice wasn't just a word here. It was visible, tangible, and undeniable. Karen had been reported to the police for arson, harassment, and multiple HOA violations. Her threats, her reckless behavior, and her obsession with control had finally caught up with her. She had underestimated a father who was willing to do whatever it took to protect his family, a Navy SEAL, trained to face extreme danger, who knew how to act decisively under pressure. The HOA had convened an emergency meeting, their faces pale and serious as they confronted the reality of Karen's actions. Her authority had been revoked immediately. She was no longer the queen of the neighborhood, no longer the tyrant who had dictated terms with fear and intimidation. For once, she had been stripped of the illusion of power she had clung to for years. I watched as the officers documented the scene, taking statements from neighbors, photographing damage and cataloging evidence. Karen had fled after the confrontation, but law enforcement knew her patterns, her obsession, and her past incidents. The arrest was inevitable. The community finally understood that her reign of terror had limits, enforced not by chance, but by courage, preparation, and the unwavering resolve of a parent who refused to be intimidated. I turned my attention to rebuilding our home. The fire had destroyed part of the ramp and damaged the exterior, but nothing could destroy the strength of our family or the resolve I had instilled in Lily. Together, we began repairs, reinforcing the ramp with fireproof materials, fortifying the house and ensuring our sanctuary was truly safe. Every nail, every board, every brick was a statement. We would not be broken. Lily watched with wide eyes, her small hands helping where she could. "Daddy," she said quietly, "we're going to be okay now, right?" "Yes, baby girl," I reassured her. "We're stronger than ever. Nothing can hurt us again." Karen's attempts at intimidation, control, and terror had failed because she had underestimated the one thing she could never control: a father's love and determination. My Navy SEAL training had been critical. It had guided every movement, every decision, every strategy. But it was love that had truly protected my daughter, and that love was unbreakable. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal. Life resumed its routines. Children played in the streets, and the gossip about Karen's downfall spread like wildfire. But for us, the story was far more personal. It was about survival, resilience, and triumph over chaos. It was about teaching Lily that fear could be faced, challenges could be overcome, and the love of family could withstand even the most extreme threats. Karen's name became a cautionary tale, a reminder to everyone that obsession, cruelty, and arrogance carry consequences. And for me, it became a confirmation that training, preparation, and unwavering resolve could protect what mattered most. The Navy SEAL mindset had prepared me for war zones, but it was love and courage that had protected my daughter in our home. As we stood together in the rebuilt yard, Lily smiling despite the lingering smoke in her hair, I felt a profound sense of victory. Karen had believed she could dominate, intimidate, and control. She had learned, the hard way, that she could not. Our home was restored, our family stronger than ever, and the neighborhood had seen the truth. Actions have consequences. And no one, not even an obsessed HOA tyrant, could threaten the love and safety of a determined father. The sun set over the horizon, casting a golden glow over our home. Lily leaned against me and I whispered, "We survived, baby girl. And we'll always protect each other. Always." Justice had been served. Karen had lost. And we, stronger and unbroken, could finally breathe freely in the home she had tried to destroy.